Today I'm going to talk about a nutrient that is not well known. It's not a star nutrient, not frequently talked about. It's called rutin, R-U-T-I-N. And the thing that caught my attention about rutin, I've known about it for years. It's found in a lot of fruits. I'll tell you the exact foods later on in this video. But in an article that was published in the February 2021 issue of the British Journal of Pharmacology, a study that involved wild male mice showed that providing rutin to the rodents extended their lives by 10%. So basically it's like a life extension nutrient in rodents. Among other effects of rutin in the rodents was that it increased fat oxidation, especially in the liver, which alleviated fatty liver. Now, fatty liver in humans is in epidemic proportions right now. An estimated 20 million Americans have fatty liver. It's also called non-alcoholic fatty liver, and because the usual fatty liver you get from drinking too much alcohol, this type of fatty liver has nothing to do with alcohol. It's caused by various, I'm not going to get into it, I think I did a separate video on that, but anyway, the point being that fatty liver is a precursor for insulin resistance, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. So it's a very serious thing. In the rodent study, they also showed that rutin promoted autophagy, which I've mentioned in previous videos. Autophagy is the process where the body basically clears out old cells and basically kind of rebuilds itself and refortifies itself. And the major benefit of fasting, including intermittent fasting, is autophagy, because autophagy is associated with life extension. A 2017 study showed that rutin also enhanced the activity of brown adipose tissue, also known as BAT, which is a type of thermogenic tissue. It's brown because it contains a greater number of blood vessels, also contains far more mitochondria, and it also contains a thermogenic protein called uncoupling protein 1. Basically converts calories into heat. So rather than being stored in the body, the calories are just burned up they just burn up, heat it up and disappear. This is called a futile energy system, because energy is being used, but it's not doing anything. It's basically just kind of being burned up. It's not causing any movement or anything like that. So this this was a rat study, and I'm also going to tell you right at the outset, nearly all the research on rutin was involved with animal studies, mostly lab rats and mice. And as I've said again, I'll repeat it in previous videos, I mentioned previous videos, that animal studies are not always extrapolated to human studies, because there's differences in the biology of rodents and humans. Not all rats aren't humans, but some humans are rats. That's another story. But anyway, the point being that about 50% of rat studies have no effect on humans whatsoever. Some people say it's even more than that. So take that into account when I discuss these various studies, because they mostly involve animals. For example, a 2017 study showed that rutin, I already talked about, that was the bad. A 2016 study found that rutin can be useful in helping to prevent Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease, they think that the cause of Alzheimer's disease is an accumulation in the brain of abnormally folded proteins, particularly beta amyloid 42 and tau, phosphorylated tau. They found that in this animal study from 2016 that among the most relevant mechanisms that would show that rutin helped prevent this disease, the most relevant mechanisms involved are effect on beta amyloid processing, aggregation action, alteration of the oxidant-antioxidant balance associated with neuronal cell loss, and removing the inflammatory component of neurodegeneration, because Alzheimer's involves a great deal of inflammation in the brain. It's a part of the disease process. What is rutin? All right, the chemical name for rutin, are you ready for this one? The chemical name for rutin is 3,30,40,5,7 pentahydroxyflavone 3-raminoglucoside, and it's a flavanol. So say that real fast. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, rutin is it's a combination of it contains quercetin, which is another flavanol, a better known flavanol, quercetin. Quercetin is recently came into prominence because it's apparently is able to get rid of senescent cells. Senescent cells, again, are old cells that accumulate in the body. They cause all kinds of problems. They release SASP, which is the senescent associated secretory phenotype. To make a long story short, it causes tremendous systemic inflammation. It speeds the aging process, and it speeds mortality. And quercetin is one of the natural elements that helps to get rid of senescent cells, and rutin is partially composed of quercetin and one other chemical. Rutin is found abundantly in various plants, such as passion flower, buckwheat, especially buckwheat. Buckwheat's probably the highest, richest natural source of rutin. It's also found in green tea and apples. Sometimes they call it vitamin P, an old name for it, vitamin P. I'm not sure why what the P stands for. Maybe it's a diuretic, I don't know. Rutin has demonstrated the neuroprotective effect on brain ischemia. Brain ischemia means the brain's not getting enough blood. In the brain, rutin shows preventive effects against convulsions and depression. Animal studies show that it significantly reduces pain and also reduces arthritic symptoms. It also shows antifungal effects against common funguses like Candida albicans. That's the type of fungus that causes, among other things, yeast infections in women. Animal studies show that it has remarkable effects against diabetes onset. Rutin added for glycemic control, that's control of sugar, via enhancement of insulin receptor kinase activity. That means that's the protein on the site of cells that interacts with at the site of the receptor that interacts with insulin, helps it bind to its cellular receptor, and this thus aiding and promoting the insulin signaling pathway that caused increased GLUT4 translocation. GLUT4 is a protein that transports glucose into muscle. So it's very important for glycogen replenishment. When you work out, you tend to stimulate GLUT4 uptake. It's one of the benefits of exercise. However, if you do a lot of eccentric muscle contractions that causes a lot of muscle damage, you actually depress GLUT4 translocation, which means that you get a delay in glycogen replenishment. So anything that augments GLUT4 is going to augment glucose uptake, especially into muscle, which is a very good thing because it also helps to prevent diabetes. That's why exercise helps to prevent diabetes. Rutin is a selective and non-toxic modulator of hypercholesterolemia, which is a medical term for elevated blood cholesterol. In a study conducted on diet-induced hypercholesteremic golden Syrian hamster models. Why do they use hamsters? Because hamsters react to cholesterol similarly to humans. In other words, some animals aren't affected by cholesterol. Hamsters are. That's why they use hamsters in studies related to cholesterol. Rutin significantly reduced plasma triglyceride levels, that's fat in the blood, in experimental animals. Along with this, rutin also caused a decrease in levels of total cholesterol and HDL, or high-density lipoprotein cholesterol. The HDL cholesterol is not good. You don't want to decrease that because HDL cholesterol is protective. But the fact that it lowered total and HDL kind of evens itself out, so it's not that bad. Animal studies show beneficial effects on hypertension or high blood pressure and increased blood clotting. In fact, one of the greatest effects of rutin from a standpoint of health is its very potent effect on preventing internal blood clotting. What it does is it inhibits a chemical that it inhibits a chemical that initiates the blood clotting process, and that's important because a lot of heart attacks and strokes are caused by a clot occluding an artery. In the heart, they call that a myocardial infarction or heart attack. In the brain, it could be an ischemic stroke, which is basically caused by a blood clot blocking an artery in the brain. So anything like this anti-clotting effect of rutin is very potent. In fact, they tested 5,000 natural substances. This was done at Harvard University, and rutin came out #1 for as far as potency in preventing internal blood clotting. So that's one of the great features of rutin. If you have a tendency, I would suggest, if you have a tendency, let's say, to have heart attacks, or heart disease, if people, for example, are taking aspirin. Aspirin does the same thing. Aspirin also prevents clotting by inhibiting something called, it changes the balance of prostaglandins in the Oh God, you can't help slipping into technical stuff. I'm sorry when you talk about this stuff, but aspirin works. It took them 100 years to figure out how aspirin worked. Aspirin works. You have these things called prostaglandins, which are substances in the body made from dietary fat, particularly arachidonic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid. Anyway, you have two types of let's say, prostaglandins in the bloodstream. You have thromboxane A2, and you have prostacyclin. Thromboxane stimulates blood clotting, internal blood clotting, which is bad because, like as I said, that's a precursor of heart attacks and strokes. Prostacyclin prevents internal or platelet aggregation that's related to heart attacks and strokes. So the ideal situation is you want to have more prostacyclin than thromboxane. Now, as a point of fact, as a factoid, when you take anabolic steroids in large amounts, you stimulate thromboxane at the expense of prostacyclin, and because of that, people taking large doses of particularly oral steroids are at a greater risk for heart attacks and strokes. Now you know why, because the steroids stimulate thromboxane production in place of prostacyclin, which means if you add a line under it, this would translate into bodybuilders or athletes or anyone who wants to use larger doses of oral anabolic steroids. They'd be wise to either take a baby aspirin every day, 81 milligrams, or to take a Rutin supplement of about 500 milligrams a day to help prevent this clotting effect, because they will, no matter who you are, if you take a large dose of oral steroids, you will be subject to greater chance of internal blood clotting. And like I say, if you have anywhere atherosclerosis in your heart or a little bit of narrowing arteries in your brain, if that clot travels, you're a dead man or woman or whatever. So, just want to throw that in. Rutin is also a natural protein pump inhibitor. There are several drugs. I actually don't remember some of the trade names, but they're known as protein pump inhibitors. They're used to help treat ulcers because protein pump inhibitors inhibit the release of histamine, which stimulates the production of stomach acid. Unfortunately, protein pump inhibitors, I should tell you, are some of the most widely prescribed drugs in medicine. The bad part about protein pump inhibitors is they have very toxic effects if used for extended times, including something like a 4 times greater risk of a heart attack. So, the fact that Rutin is a natural protein pump inhibitor is great, because I'm not saying that people who are, have severe ulcers or something, they should get off protein pump inhibitor drugs and start taking Rutin. But if you have a tendency, for example, to have ulcers, it might be a good idea. By the way, most ulcers are caused by a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, H. pylori, and you can knock that out with just antibiotics. But that's a lot of ulcers are caused by this particular organism. So, Rutin, by being a natural protein pump inhibitor, might help prevent ulcers. It also has anti-asthma activity. It helps to reduce localized inflammation in the lungs, because asthma is an inflammatory disease. Rutin helps to preserve bone mass by blunting the effects of osteoclasts. You have 2 types of cells in bone. Osteoblasts build bone, osteoclasts degrade bone. And Rutin is a natural anti-osteoclast substance. So, for example, women with small bone structures, they have the greatest tendency to get osteoporosis as they age. It might be a good idea for them to consume foods that contain Rutin, because it inhibits osteoclasts, as does estrogen, by the way. Estrogen itself also inhibits osteoclasts and stimulates osteoblasts. And of course, they should also consume calcium and do weight-bearing exercise. Those are the preventive ways to prevent osteoporosis. Rutin also helps to prevent cataracts. What are cataracts? Cataracts, you can see, are a clouding of the lens of the eye. It's caused by gradual accumulation of usually of free radicals, or what they call advanced glycation end products, which involves the deposition of sugar into protein structures. The lens of the eye is basically pure protein. If you get sugar in there, it becomes clouded over, and there you have your cataract. And Rutin will help because it blocks advanced glycation end products, so it would have a preventive effect against the development of cataracts. Rutin also has, for bodybuilders might be interested, Rutin provides natural diuretic effects. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, it's not the same as taking Lasix or aldactone or any of the pharmaceutical diuretics. It's not going to cause that kind of diuresis where you're pissing your brains out. But it has a mild natural diuretic effect. So if you don't want to take if you don't want to take the pharmaceutical diuretics, which are epidemic in bodybuilding and fitness right now, by the way, but if you don't want to take them because they do have a ton of side effects, if you take too much, it can flatten out your muscles, but it looks terrible because your muscles are 72% water. Pharmaceutical diuretics tend to have an overkill effect. If you want to avoid them, you could try natural diuretics. Number one is drinking plenty of water, because water inhibits antidiuretic hormone from the posterior pituitary gland, and by doing that, it causes you to excrete more water. The more water you drink, the more water you excrete. Or you could try something like dandelion, which is a natural herb, which some studies show actually has comparable diuretic effects to furosemide, which is latex, which is one of the more powerful drug diuretics. And you could throw in some Rutin. And the good part about the dandelion and the Rutin and the water, unless you drink too much water, is that there's no side effects, unlike all pharmaceutical diuretics. All pharmaceutical diuretics have side effects, every one of them, no matter what you hear. Rutin protects the testes from, of course this applies to men. I haven't met too many women that have testes, which are idiomatic parlance balls. And if I did meet a woman who had testes, I would probably set a world record for the 100-yard dash running in the other direction. But that's another story. But the good thing to know is that Rutin does protect the testes from oxidative stress. Why is that important? Because one theory of why men show lower testosterone levels as they age is because of years and years of oxidative damage to the Leydig cells of the testes. The Leydig cells are the portion of the testes where testosterone is produced. If they get damaged, there goes your testosterone production. And what happens is your body tries to overcome it by secreting more luteinizing hormone from the pituitary gland. The luteinizing hormone, LH, travels to the blood, to the testes, where it dictates the synthesis of testosterone from the starting substance of cholesterol. But if your Leydig cells are really damaged, it's like calling somebody where there's no answer. In other words, the luteinizing hormone, the Leydig cells aren't responding because they've been so damaged from oxidative damage. And where do you get the oxidative damage from? Believe it or not, catecholamines, which are norepinephrine, epinephrine. Every time you're under stress or excited, or even when you're working out or you're taking pre-workout supplements, to burn fat, they stimulate catecholamines. Unfortunately, these catecholamines at the level of the testes have an oxidative effect that actually gradually destroys the Leydig cells with age, unless you take certain precautions, like, for example, consume foods high in antioxidants, that type of thing. Exercise itself has an antioxidant effect. If you do that, there'll be minimal damage, to tell you the truth. But they think, this is a theory, they think that most of the damage of the Leydig cells is caused by oxidative damage, unless you get kicked in the balls or something like that. That's a whole different story. Rutin really won't help that. Rutin is also known to inhibit cancer cell growth by causing what they call cell cycle arrest. That's a way that tumor cells replicate, and also stimulates cancer cells or tumor cells to undergo a process called apoptosis, which is basically a self-destruction or a suicide of the cancer cell. Cancer cells will do anything they can to avoid apoptosis because it basically destroys them. So what they do is they secrete substances such as insulin-like growth factor 1 or IGF-1, and IGF-1 prevents cellular apoptosis. But because of tumor cells secreting IGF-1 to protect themselves, a lot of people don't realize that, and they call IGF-1 a carcinogen. In other words, they think that IGF-1 causes cancer. But in that situation, they're putting the egg before the chicken. Yeah, the egg before the chicken, because these tumors, it's not the IGF-1 in the body that's stimulating cancer. It's the IGF-1 secreted by the tumor cells themselves. See? So anyway, the rutin will help prevent that, and it also inhibits proliferation of tumor cells, angiogenesis, which is the development of new blood cells, because for cancer to metastasize or spread, it has to sprout out new blood vessels. Otherwise, it can't spread. And if it can't spread, it dies off. The cancer kills you by metastasis. That's how you die from cancer. In other words, oncologists won't tell, that's cancer specialists, they won't tell this to people, but if you detect a cancer, that's why they always tell you to try to detect cancer at its earliest stages, because if you find a tumor in its original spot, they call that medically in situ. If you find its original spot, and you undergo treatment, you have a 90% chance of survival. However, once the tumor undergoes metastasis, starts to spread, it reverses. Now you only have a 10% chance of survival. So, you want to, there's actually a whole slew of drugs that are in production now or in experimentation to prevent the process of angiogenesis by tumor cells, which would basically kill the cancers. Rutin is extensively studied for antimicrobial activity against various strains of bacteria. It has demonstrated a profound degree of inhibition on the growth of the bacteria E. coli. That's a common cause of food poisoning. It's also a common cause of urinary infections, and especially in women. It also appears to offer protection against viruses. Not all viruses. I don't think it'll help you with the coronavirus or the COVID-19, but I could be wrong about that, because quercetin does. And, rutin, as I said, it contains quercetin. So I haven't seen any studies on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if rutin also offers some preventive effects against COVID-19, but I have not seen any evidence of that. Topical use of rutin applied to the skin helps prevent sun-induced skin damage. That's probably an antioxidant effect, because one of the reasons why sun causes skin cancers and aging of the skin is because the ultraviolet rays from the sun stimulate oxidative processes in the skin, which damage DNA and cause mutations, and that's the way it causes skin cancer. The way it causes aging is by harming the ultraviolet rays. Will harm the proteins in the skin that maintain skin resilience, such as collagen and elastin. That's why the sun is the greatest cause of facial aging. Any dermatologist will tell you that. Speaking of rutin and skin aging, to examine the effects of rutin in vivo in the body, a rutin-containing cream, this is a study, a rutin-containing cream was applied to human skin. A double-blind clinical study was conducted in 40 subjects ages between 30 to 50 and divided into control and experimental groups. The test material was applied for 4 weeks. After 2 and 4 weeks, dermal density, that's skin density, skin elasticity, the length and area of crow's feet, that's the stuff around the eyes, and the number of under-eye wrinkles following the application of either the control or rutin-containing cream were analyzed. Rutin increased the messenger RNA expression of collagen, type 1, alpha-1 collagen, and decreased the messenger RNA expression of matrix metallopeptidase 1, which actually breaks down skin proteins. We verified that reactive oxygen species, or free radical scavenging activity, was stimulated by rutin in a dose-dependent manner, and we identified that rutin exerted protective effects against conditions of oxidative stress. Furthermore, rutin increased skin elasticity and decreased the length, area, and number of wrinkles. The consequences of human aging are primarily visible on the skin, such as increased wrinkling, sagging, and decreased elasticity. Overall, this study demonstrated the biological effects of rutin on reactive oxygen species-induced skin aging. In other words, topical rutin seems to help prevent skin aging. It's good to know. I'm going to have an article in my Applied Metabolics very soon about how to repair the damage to skin incurred by exposure to the sun. There are certain nutrients that can actually help repair that. Rutin administration in mice prevented depletion of 2 of the primary endogenous antioxidants of the body, namely superoxide dismutase and reduced glutathione. These are major antioxidants. They tend to decrease with age, and when they decrease with age, the chances of various diseases go up. The fact that rutin helps this is a mouse study, the fact that rutin could help preserve these would go a long way towards extending health and longevity. Rutin in animal studies also offers some degree of protection in the liver and the kidney. Rutin is basically classified as a glycoside of the flavonoid quercetin, as I said. The sources are buckwheat, apricots, cherries, grapes, grapefruit, plums, and oranges. The usual recommendation for Rutin supplements, if you want to use them, is 250 milligrams 2 times a day. Adults using Rutin to treat osteoarthritis can take 250 milligrams 3 times a day or every 12 hours. So that's about it for Rutin. I was inspired to do this video by seeing that mouse study where it showed a 10% increase in lifespan. That's not bad. I mean, that's a mouse study, but I mean, there's no evidence that it does that in humans. But let's put it this way: you after hearing this video and hearing all the ways that Rutin affects the health of animals, I'd say there's a good chance that a lot of this is duplicating humans. So Rutin actually is a very healthy nutrient to take. If you're concerned with any of the conditions I mentioned in this video, it's not very expensive. You might want to look into Rutin, or even less expensive is just to eat the foods I mentioned. Again, buckwheat is the best source of Rutin. Apricots, cherries, grapes, grapefruit, plums, oranges, most citrus fruits contain natural Rutin, so it's a cheap way to go. That's about it for Rutin. I'm rooting for Rutin. I hope you are too. Anyway, if you want the best information on nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research you can use today, fat loss techniques that really work, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, supplement science, which supplements work, which ones don't. I'm not involved with any supplement company. I don't hold anything back. I'll tell you which supplements are crap and save you a lot of money. Also based on my experience with a lot of these supplements. You won't hear this from a lot of people because a lot of the people who make these videos, they either sell supplements or they're associated on the payroll of supplement companies. So you're not going to hear the truth from them, but you will from me in Applied Metabolics. 100% truth. It's 40 to 50 pages every month. It has no advertisements. It's pure information. You won't find this anywhere else. I promise you. Because nobody has my 59 years of constant study and experience in the field, in the gym. I know what works, what doesn't, and I will tell you. I also include anecdotes of the so-called golden age of bodybuilding, Arnold, all those guys back then. I was around, I trained with those guys. I make it interesting. So subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where every day I post new information on nutrition, exercise, science, general medicine, every day, 7 days a week. And I also have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics website, where current subscribers only. I don't accept unsolicited questions. Current subscribers only can send me short questions related to something I might have read in the newsletter, or anything that comes to mind, as long as they're short questions. Again, I won't answer unsolicited questions. I look at this question and answer thing as a kind of bonus to my subscribers, because I appreciate the fact that they support my work. Those that don't support my work by not subscribing, well, the best advice I can offer you is go ask somebody else or find the information on your own, because you're not going to get it from me. It's that simple. I mean, my newsletter is very inexpensive. I mean, it costs less than a cup of coffee at one of these fancy coffee shops. It's less than the cost of a daily newspaper. I know, nobody reads newspapers, but it still costs less than a newspaper with 1,000 times more information. So, in fact, my newsletter, from what I could see, is basically only 1/3 the monthly cost of most of the other digital newsletters, and it's better written because I'm a professional writer, and it's much more interesting and informative than all of these other digital newsletters. Check it out yourself, and you'll see that I'm telling you the truth. It's, again, www.appliedmetabolics.com. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. They are the best. Thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good day.